David Helgason. I'm the CEO of Unity Technologies, and we make the Unity game engine all over the world. Around 10 years ago, we had this dream to make game development easier for people. So, to make games requires a lot of technology, a lot of very advanced technology. Whether it's the lighting or the character animation or just the optimization for the rendering of the objects. I could actually speak for hours just about all the pieces. It's very complex. So in order to do this, usually you have a big team and you spend a lot of money and a lot of time. And for small developers, that's just not viable. And even for large developers, the time that goes into it is just too expensive. It just slows them down too much. So we had this idea that if you made this very easy to use and very kind of elegantly put together, many more people could make games than before. So this was basically the vision. So we started 10 years ago, so 2003. And what happened was that we built a pretty good product. It wasn't great back then, now it's great. But in the beginning it was rough. It had many shortcomings, but it had some elegance, and people that looked at it, they saw that it was, very compelling and powerful. The problem was that 10 years ago, everyone was building big games. They were all big teams, and they had a lot of money. So there wasn't that need for this, fast execution for small teams. We realized that mobile would get interesting at some point. So we kind of waited. Then at some point, the iPhone opened up. The App Store opened in 2008, and we knew it was exciting. We didn't know how big, we didn't know how exciting, but we were like, that's a great place to be. So we went in very early. Basically, only a few months after the App Store opened, we launched Unity for the iPhone, and it was just transformational. Our company, which was 12 people, and like a small software company, we just started accelerating very quickly. Then a couple of years later, Android came and became as popular, and now probably more popular. And we were early in on Android. And so while we still support console development, PC development, web development, and it's actually that's a very meaningful part of our business, the fastest growth is in mobile, and we've been there since the first day of the smartphone. We have 150 engineers who are just going crazy, making Unity better, and we invest, basically all the money that comes into the company, we just invest back into the technology, because we really believe that, we can go really far before we invest too much. Like, there's just so many needs and so many opportunities. And on the top level, you construct your world, you put your objects together, you import your 3D models or 2D files from 3D Studio Max or Maya or Photoshop or from your camera. You can get the character animation and movement from all these applications and Motion Builder, but also from motion capture and things like that. And you take sound files and video files, and you put it all there together into Unity, which is actually why it's called Unity. Brings everything together. You give it life by defining physical properties, lighting, and interaction. You can do this in a couple of hours with almost no code. Of course, complex games require more, but it means that people can be productive the first day they're working, which is quite a difference from any other past technology, really. Basically, Unity is layered. So on the top level, it's drag and draw. It's assigning things in like an inspector, very graphical. The level below that, you can actually direct objects. You can move them around with code. And there are even lower levels where you have direct access to the rendering, the 3D objects, the data. So you can really do very rich and complex things. So yeah, Unity can be a bit deceptively simple in that people look at it and that's too easy. But it turns out almost all the big companies are using Unity, not for all their productions, but for more and more of their productions. Some of the best teams, whether they're in big companies or not, are using Unity now. 2D game, but when you look at it, it has particles. It's very rich in production. That's done by a 30-person team, and it's one of the top grossing games. So what they gained was like speed of development, the multi-platformness, and although a lot of the game is kind of simple technologically, they can add these more advanced features on top. So what is nice is you can mix the very advanced and the simple. You get games like Death Trigger, Shadowgun, which are some of the most sort of advanced graphically mobile games today, and you even get although we're talking a lot about mobile, the same skills, the same teams, they can build big browser games and big client games, and we more and more see the games go cross-platform like that. So no, it's we've always had to believe that you can combine the most advanced with the most simple. It requires a lot of design and a lot of thinking to not make one take too much control. Like, it's easy to make something that's very complex and powerful. Not easy, but relatively easy. And it's very easy to do something that's kind of light and simple. But to combine it is extremely hard.
Yeah, I can see.
Well, we always believed that technology was not enough. So advanced technology is great. Then you combine that with very nice tooling, simple workflows, and good documentation. But even that is a bit 90s. So to make it really powerful and modern, we worked really hard to make a big community, because that's kind of what powers the technology and makes it more valuable. So there's a huge community on Unity. A lot of it is very informal. So forums, chat groups, QQ groups, things like that. But some of it is also more formalized. So we created a couple of years ago a marketplace, a very kind of well-run, I think, curated marketplace for Unity assets. And people go there and they sell often systems they've created for themselves. Systems to make particular styles of games, shaders and graphical effects, nice explosions, almost every type of asset you might need for a game, whether it's graphics or code, or often it's a mix. And they sell them in bundles. And the prices go from like free, there's a lot of free stuff, to really cheap, $1, $2, $5, $10, up to $50, $100 typically. But those more expensive things are extremely big, complex systems, like it's like software packages almost. And what's fantastic is that, again, we were thinking about the small developers. We were thinking about the groups of people that don't have all the skills. If you have a small team, maybe you don't have an animator, or maybe you don't have a graphics programmer. Of course, the big companies, they appreciate this almost even more, because for them, if you can spend $10 on something and it saves you like a day of work, I mean, that's fantastic for any group, whether it's a big company or not. So it's been really successful. It's been growing like this. At this point, some of the biggest sellers, some of the most successful packages, these guys are making $30,000, even $40,000 per month. So they're getting rich actually, because these are individuals. So mobile gaming today is an incredible space. Like, the growth is ridiculously high, the opportunities are massive, and also there's incredible opportunities for small and medium-sized teams, whether they're inside big companies or completely independent. And it's almost like the small teams have a better chance than the big teams, based on a lot of market dynamics and sort of technical challenges. It just seems that small teams are more successful. The small teams don't have time to build their own technologies. Some do anyway, and they're fine, but a lot of the time they don't have time for it, and they don't have the resources. So basically, being able to build on a technology like Unity means that they can start on the 20th floor of the building, and they just have to build a little bit on top to make a fantastic. And because they don't have to think about the very complex and boring challenges of cross-platform development, and they don't have to think about a lot of boring stuff like importing 3D files and which order you should render the objects in and things like that, which are very complicated technical challenges. They can focus on gameplay, iteration, because to make games fun, you really need to be able. You really need to go in and kind of try out a lot of things, and it's a lot about tuning, because games in the end are almost like pure interaction. Like they don't really mean much by themselves often, but it's about the timing when you press something, what happens, how fast, and that's not something you can design intellectually. You have to try it out. So what we see is that with tools that are great and take away the technical difficulties or many of the technical difficulties, the games simply get better. Now it's also a very competitive space, and the types of games that are successful change all the time. Gamers are always comparing the games with what they've just been playing, and if they look worse, if they are slower, if the gameplay is more less well tuned, they don't want to try, right? So every game has to be almost better than all the previous games, and that means that getting that kind of boost of technology is extremely useful. And we're also starting to see a transition, where the lower end handsets that don't have 3D graphics are, there's still many of them, but they're starting to get replaced. So in the next year or 2 years, you'll see a massive replacement of that, where you see, more and more 3D games being successful. This has already happened in the Western markets, and we're starting to see this kind of trend in China as well. The engine is called Unity. The web domain is called Unity 3D because that was the only domain that was free. And we didn't have any money to buy domains. It has very powerful 3D features, but probably at least half the games that are made with Unity are 2D games. Or maybe more often some mixture where the gameplay is 2D, but it's being built in 3D with particle systems, with parallax and other like 3D effects. And what we find is that a lot of things are easier when you actually have the third dimension, whereas a lot of games are best designed in 2D. So for us, it's never been either or, and we're always working on making more advanced 3D graphics effects, but also improving 2D game development, helping developers do pixel perfect rendering. Helping developers avoid anti-aliasing edges, all the sort of boring technical challenges that go into making great 2D games, just Unity 4.2, which we released a few days ago, actually improved that a lot. So for us, it's about giving tools to developers, and then the developers will decide kind of how to use them, so basically for us, it's giving them a lot of freedom. For individual developers and small teams, small companies and new companies, Unity is completely free. You don't have to pay anything. There are more advanced features that we sell, and for established companies, they have to buy the pro versions of our software. So it's not free for established companies, but to get started, if you're coming out of school, this is basically done because, remember, when we were a small studio, we didn't have any money for software. Even cheap software was still too expensive for us, So that's why we just did this. And then we say, if you make money with your games, that's your money. We don't own that money. But you may want to upgrade optionally to get more features to make your games better. But we have these tiers, so anyone can get started. So when we started, we were really thinking about technology. That was what we knew. We were programmers, So we built Unity, and documentation is kind of technology as well. And a community is also natural for developers, so we built a big, very great community. We built a marketplace, but already there we were starting to think, what other problems do they have? It's not just about technology, it's also about content, having all the assets together. It's about teamwork. For a lot of the smaller developers, getting noticed is hard, and also having relationships to big companies is hard. So we developed different kind of approaches to help them connect better with the big companies. So one of the things we've done is we've partnered with 6 different platforms in China. So we partnered with 91. We partnered with 360, the 360 App Store, and we partnered with China Mobile. We also partnered on the TV side. We're creating kind of zones for Unity games in these stores so they can get more noticed. So gamers who want high quality games, they can find Unity games. That's one thing we've done. We've also in the realization that the game industry, although it's a very global industry, there's still a lot of friction between the parts of the world, the different territories. Since we have become a very global company, we're operating in almost all markets. We're now more and more helping developers get connections to new markets, even to the level of taking games and translating them and localizing them and things like that. So really, we're trying to ask big questions. How can we make the developers more successful? No, actually, we think it's cross-platformness is very important. So I can say, when we started, we only focused on Mac and PC because these were the only platforms in 2005 that were really open. The game consoles were very closed. Now they're actually more open, and mobile wasn't really relevant. Now, as more and more platforms became relevant and became open, we started realizing that one of the things that we could do that was very valuable to developers is to support a lot of different platforms. Now, most developers will not use all that. Yeah. Most developers will go to a few platforms. If they're mobile developers, they will do maybe Android and iOS, maybe Windows Mobile as well. If they're going global, they may go BlackBerry as well. If they're building PC, they probably also want to build Mac because it's very similar hardware. If they're building, Xbox, they would consider PlayStation as well. Maybe they'll also consider PC, Mac, and if the game is not too complicated, they can even port the game to mobile. So more and more we're seeing the games move across. Now, we can't predict where the opportunities are going to be and what the developers need. So what we do is we support a lot of different platforms. And that what is great about that is that it creates a freedom for the developer to capture the opportunities as they arise. Because often when you start a game project, when you're finished after 6, 9, 12, 18, 24 months, the opportunity is different. A couple of years ago, people started building iOS games. And then, a year later, suddenly Android was, growing faster. So it's no good if the technology you use does not support that, give you that freedom. So that's basically what we do and have done a lot of. We support almost every platform you can imagine at this point, and including some platforms that people don't think of as being important. Why do we support them? Well, we don't know, and sometimes the opportunities are there for certain developers. There's partnership opportunities with the platforms, but also what we've done more recently is we've partnered with the platforms to get their support and to get their technical, development resources, so that Unity is not just available on all the platforms, but really good on all the platforms. And by having the platform companies commit to that, it basically means that there's just better technology and more freedom for the developers. Mobile is the fastest growing, but now in the West at least we're starting a new console generation, and there will be some pretty interesting opportunities on the new PS4 and the Xbox One, which will have open deployments, so even small companies can now build games for them. For the next generation consoles, we only announced the support in the last months mostly. We know there will be a number of good games, both because Unity is really good and we have a lot of developers that want to do it, but also because we partnered so closely with the console companies that some of their first-party and second-party developments that they fund themselves are being built with Unity. Like most people of my generation, I played games since I was a kid. I didn't have a game console when I was a kid, but I had a PC, so we were playing some PC games. Very simple, like this was like CGA time and very, very basic graphics. But I was very excited about that. I was 10, 11 years old, and I wanted to make games. So that's why I learned to program, and actually if you ask programmers who are building, websites and banking software and all these guys, so many of them learned to program to make games. Then they did something else. So I think there's a lot of, amongst programmers, there's a lot of passion for game development. So anyway, I went into the, I was just a normal teenager. I played a lot of games, and I programmed all the time, but I never made any games when I was a kid, actually. I ended up, working in the web industry and building databases and all these things. And then at some point, an old friend of mine, started making games for fun. He had no business plan, but he just wanted to try it out. And I was kind of hanging out with him, and we had some ideas of making games that would change the world. It's too complicated to tell, but we really wanted to make some, big impact. Then we realized that, it was actually very hard to get funding for games like that. But we started, coding the technology. So we kind of became a technology company, by first planning to be a game company. And we even made one game, actually. It was not very good, or at least not very successful. But all along, we had this passion for games, but also for the people creating them. Because there's something really magical about, I don't know, it's a fantastic industry. Like, I've worked in different industries before, and I know a lot of people in different industries. And I've never met an industry where people are so passionate and creative, and of course they're very intelligent, but also they are very, they're just very friendly. And they really, are just fun people. And so we have a very strong passion for the developers and want to help them. And we feel that if you give game developers great tools, and they just get better, and the end products will be better as well. And we love these games. That's kind of how we got into this whole thing. It's 10 years ago since we started, kind of, and we've never worked on games again. Actually, we were 3 founders, and one of the founders, he just left to start a game company because he had this itch. He just had to use Unity, So he started a small game company using Unity, and after he left, very friendly, he left the company, and he called me after a few weeks, and he's like, David, the software we created, it's the best software in the world. in 3 weeks, I basically made like a game that looks amazing. So, he had that passion. I'm more passionate about the technology and building a business of it. Making a game is just a very strange thing because, you're writing a lot of code, but you're also, making things look nice. You're making things feel nice. You're making them sound nice, and it all has to be very synchronized, and it's a very artistic experience. I programmed a lot in my life, but only when I was making the game was it like really, I don't know, so artistic in a way. And when you're doing that kind of work, you don't really want to sleep, and you go into the zone, and you're just creating and creating and creating. That was a lot of fun. Almost too much fun. Like, we didn't sleep for like a year. Because we don't make our own games, we have to learn about game development continuously. So what we do instead is we engage with a lot of our customers. We talk to them all the time, but we also visit them, we spend time with them, and even sometimes we embed some of our programmers with our customers. They actually sit with them and just, kind of experience their, joys and their pains. And some of the features in Unity have also been co-developed with customers, where we went and spent time, creating new systems to solve like particularly challenging game problems. So I think Unity is very inspired by the community. And also, because we have the asset store where we have these people from the community building new features and new extensions, we've hired a number of these people to come and work inside Unity because we saw how visionary they were in making Unity better. If you talk about games as a medium, I think for me, it's a very fascinating medium. I mean, it's a big business. But for me, it's an art form as well, and it's one of my favorite art forms. And it's been really challenging, I think, to combine, especially, until maybe 5-10 years ago, until a few years ago. the cost of making a game was so relatively high that there wasn't a lot of experimentation. And the experimentation that didn't have very good tools, so it looked very primitive. But now, with the huge marketplaces, even niche games can be successful, at least successful enough to pay the creators, their salary. So we see a lot of things going on now where like small teams are building things that are not huge successes, but they're, beautiful, challenging, interesting products. They give the gamers like great experiences, and it's just fun. Like almost every day now we see something that's interesting on Kickstarter, which is this crowdfunding platform. We see so many interesting games that are coming out that many of them will not be like huge commercial successes, but because they can find their audience before they create the game or finish the game, they can actually build, small, meaningful businesses on that. I think there are so many ways of defining success, everything from commercial success to just, the joy of creating. And I think both are completely valid. I wish everyone huge commercial success, but, that's not always the most important thing. Unity is 10 years old. And for 9 years, we were really a Western company. All our focus was in Europe and the US. We had customers in China, but very few, and we couldn't really speak to them, So we were using translation programs, and we made some visits, and we knew there was a huge and very great industry here. And we even knew that many of them were using Unity, but we hadn't really built the relationships. So a year ago, we felt that we absolutely had to become part of the Chinese industry. So like we've done before elsewhere, we decided not to send a couple of Americans or something. We decided to hire local people and build like a really Chinese division. We did that with the first employee 14 months ago, and now there's almost 30 people in China working for us, mainly in Shanghai, but also in Beijing. They travel a lot. There is a Chinese website. The documentation is in Chinese. There's a Chinese community. You can find Chinese books. You can find everything in Chinese right now. Also to engage better with the community, we are also creating a kind of a training and certification program. And we partnered with, 43 universities that are teaching or going to be teaching Unity. And we're basically helping them teach better. And so that we'll have, basically more people with these very valuable skills. Both valuable to themselves, but also valuable to employers. Another thing we've done, is we don't want to just develop it, somewhere in Europe and bring it to China. So this year we basically built up an engineering team. So we actually are starting to develop features in Unity made by Chinese people that really understand the industry here and the needs of the developers, so that of course, obvious things like just, the language support and things like that, but also better understanding of what types of games are most popular, connected games, MMOs, and making sure that Unity is really good for these types of games as well. And we're not completely there with all these features, but we're really moving fast to make it better. And of course, having engineers here also means that it's much easier to provide high-quality support, because in the end, with a technical product like Unity, only engineers can really understand the technical questions, So that's another thing we're leveling up very quickly. So basically, to get in touch, just go to the website, click the Chinese flag, and start communicating. It's very straightforward and very open. We just love talking to our customers. This game industry is a very interesting one. It's growing really fast. There is a lot of small games, but there's also some really big game productions. It's extremely competitive, and that's a good thing. It's very frustrating for the people who don't win, but it means there's so much innovation and so much speed, and people work very hard. I just have a huge respect for the industry here. I think one of the shortcomings has been that and it's always dangerous when you have a very big home market. And the Chinese game industry is very, the market here is very big. It's always a risk that you don't really you're not forced to go abroad and compete elsewhere. But people are really starting to do that now, starting to explore, bringing Chinese games out of the country, building games for a more global audience. So So that's going to be interesting to watch, and we're trying to be part of that as well. Basically helping out with the tools, but also with knowledge and communications. I'm a sales guy. I love selling my tools. I love telling people that they're great. But developers don't really listen to sales guys. They have their own understanding of technology. So I think the best advice is really just download the free version and just try it out, because Unity really should sell itself. And even people that don't end up using Unity all the time, they benefit from trying it out because they learn about engines, they learn about how you can make production, and a lot of people are just using it in the beginning, at least, for prototyping. So actually, I would suggest everyone just to kind of download it, try it out, and see if it fits them. So welcome to the To-Do Game Channel. It's been fantastic spending time with you, and I just wish you a prosperous future creating and playing games.